My father was one of the first black actors in Denver. And my mother was a French horn player with the San Diego Symphony, apprenticing at 12. So here, my father, coming from the South, from Texarkana, Arkansas, he sort of really left Arkansas. I mean, he felt like he'd end up picking cotton because that's what they were doing. Cotton picking, and we just said, Daddy, you're making that up. We thought some of the stories he was telling, because we lived in Denver and had not been exposed to the South, that he was just a really creative thinker. But it was like, you pick cotton? So that was extraordinary. And my mother, being out of San Diego, really had no concept of black people. She lived in a very isolated area. Her stepfather was a developer and developed the first telescope in California, the large one there, and Waikiki Beach, all those condos there. So they were developers, and they were seamen. They worked on the ocean with great big ships and all kinds of things. And so she was a child that learned to kind of hold her own with her brothers. So being a very strong woman, white woman in the black community in Dallas, we moved to Dallas very late. And some of these things that we experienced, which were truly phenomenal, changed my life. And I think it helped me become a different kind of leader that maybe I think that's the uniqueness of all of us. We have these 5 extraordinary women that are so connected, but we're so different, and our works are different. And I think that that's what's hard, because everyone sort of goes, oh, I had that company last year, and now I have to have a different company. Well, I don't think they treat most of art in our country that way. And I don't even think we know we do it. I don't think we know what that sounds like. but I think this is helpful, because we can kind of hear how we sort of change the rules in our minds and hearts when it comes to black people in our country. It's really interesting. So I think we come out of the 60s, and my mother, not coming out of that particular experience, was always perplexed with the kind of prejudice and bias and hatred and manipulation. And she became almost like, my daddy called her Eleanor Roosevelt. She was like, you tell me this is wrong. And she was so clear about what was right or wrong. So my leadership comes from that. My mother, even during the Black Panther time, I remember my mother, she knew I went to the Black Panthers meetings, because I later played Angela Davis for 10 years. I danced her. I created a role based upon Nikki Giovanni's poem about a love poem for Angela, And I played Angela Davis and went into the prisons and did all of that. And it was one of the hardest things I ever chose to do, is to choreograph on myself a role that would sort of shape me, but haunt me at the same time. And my mother would say, honey, people don't come to the theater to go. They want relief when they come to the theater. And so I love my mother very much, but I said, Mama, you don't understand. So that's the part of my daddy that I understood. It was that we have no other choice but to educate every time we get on stage. We can entertain, but we have to educate. So she became a great fan. So as we sat around the table, my father, as an actor, my father was a musician as well. He was a jazz musician. So here we were. We had classical music in the morning. We have jazz music at night. So we really were quite blessed to come up with such diversity in our home. And people loved to come to our house because it was a little bit like that. Way wild. And Denver was an interesting community at that time. The Klan was pretty prevalent. the Klan, most of the white businessmen were Klan members. And our Stapleton Airport was named after the head of the Klan. And so my mother was pretty aware of that. So it was pretty intense. And my father was always, every time we got in our little station wagon with all our 4 kids in the car, we'd always look and Daddy would say, "That's right, there's Mr. Charlie. He's following me again." So we were used to being followed by the police all the time. So I think that part of being judged before anyone knows your character, long before we knew about Dr. King, I felt like I had lived with my father as a role model of Dr. King. He had his principles and was born on January 20th. And so Dr. King's spirit, and we grew up with knowing about Harry Belafonte as an activist and Sidney Poitier. So those were the role models in my home. So as we watched my father acting, he would do plays that were from clowns and children's shows to really Ed Bullen's really heavy-duty black literature. And he would come to the table, wake us all up, and we'd have coffee. And he'd say, "Okay, Mama, I want you to hear this." And he'd say, "This line doesn't make sense." He says, "This is not real." And he says, so the writer, and he would challenge the writers if it would be, the writers, he said, "This isn't real, this isn't the way it really happens." And Mama says, "Well, honey, I don't know. You can't change what has been written." And so he said, "Your role as an actor is to interpret the words. You don't change the words." She was very meticulous like that. So that integrity about work began to happen. And I think that's the other thing that I learned, is that as choreographers, we've had so many, I felt it was important to have the voices of mostly black men, mostly, because I felt that our country, in terms of our history, and it was wonderful to hear Baraka talk about how we talk about ourselves yesterday. Because of course, when you're mixed, you're called everything, from high yellow to mulatto to whatever. I remember traveling through Italy, and they said, "And so, what are you? Are you Italian? Are you so-and-so?" I said, "No, I'm black and white," and they called me mulatto. And they went, "Oh, mulatto?" They said, "Never use that word again." And I said, "Why?" They said, "Mulatto means sick, you're sick." And I went, "Wow." And so I went, wow. The words we use for ourselves, or that we have adopted, I think are very powerful, and I think we learn the power of words. So in all of my journey, acting, music, movement, social issues have been a part of my blood. And so I'm just very blessed to be able to share it with young people who are courageous enough to step into those worlds. And so I tell the dancers, you're musicians, you are actors, and you are communicators, and you're educators, and you're ambassadors. And all of those things, I think those are very important, that they hear that it doesn't, I'm just the one that activates it or brings it together. I feel like I was in the old days where you have the operators, and they would get one line and they'd hook it into another. I felt like I'm the operator. I get to hook that one up with that one. And if those two calls don't work, I have to pull that one out and hook them up with somebody else. And that's been an interesting thing. I think, as I said, during the Black Panther movement and during the SNCC movement, that's what shaped me. So I would be there with Jesse Jackson. I would be there with any of the great leaders, because it was important. We were young people, young people coming out of high school and out of in college, and that's why I think that particular time your brain is so ready and active. And so, going to hear Stokely Carmichael and we were ready, honey, to change the world. We were going to do it. And that's powerful. So my changing of the world has changed how I think about that, because I don't think it's as easy as we think.